Hey everybody, this is Marina, your podcast host at UNBOSSED. Here we go. At UNBOSSED, I interview amazing women in Chicago. There is so much woman power in this city that I want to provide these women a platform to tell their story. Please connect with us and please consider supporting by sharing, liking, commenting the podcast. Tell all your Netflix friends and family about it. Submit a recommendation for a guest, subscribe on your favorite podcast app, and donate by clicking on the anchor link and help me continue to make great episodes. I hope you enjoy and welcome to the show. Cheryl Kemp is the founder and CEO at IndiFit, a business management platform for fitness and wellness instructors. Cheryl's earliest roots are in the restaurant industry, which she jumped into at the ripe age of 16. Those roots led her to several exciting career adventures in the food delivery and digital ordering space, including being an early marketing hire at OrderUp, who was ultimately acquired by Groupon, and leading enterprise partnerships at Ritual. The only thing she loves more than building startups is group fitness, which is why she's deeply passionate about empowering fitness instructors with technology. I love this. She's also a dog and plant mom who can be spotted scooting around Chicago on her Vespa. Check out the picture on the podcast. Welcome, Cheryl. Hey everybody, this is Marina, your podcast host at UNBOSSED. Today, my guest is Cheryl Kemp. I'm sorry, let me say that again. One more time. Hey everybody, this is Marina, your podcast host at UNBOSSED. Today, my guest is Cheryl Kemp, founder and chief exercise officer at IndiFit. Welcome, Cheryl.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, the intros are always the hard part because I have to read it. Everything else is like super off the cuff, and I'm really good at that.
Yeah, I love that you got the job title right. Clearly, I'm doing a cute little thing here with CEO, turning it into chief exercise officer.
In the Latinx community, we have the CXO term where you're like your chief executive, your chief officer, your chief everything, your chief people, and so you put an X in the middle instead of the letter.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, so I call myself the CXO of UNBOSSED because
yeah, chief everything officer. That's a good one too. I like it.
Exactly. So IndiFit, you are one of the few female founders in Chicago of what is going to turn out to be a super successful company. I'm going to put it out there for you in the universe already.
Thank you. I like those vibes. I'm excited to manifest that.
But before we talk about IndiFit and all the amazing hard work that you're doing there, tell us a story about who Cheryl is. Who are you? Where did you grow up? And maybe something that is very indicative of your career as an entrepreneur.
Sure. So the where did I grow up question is always a really funny one for me because the answer is almost everywhere. So something that, really shaped me and was a huge part of my childhood was moving around a lot. So I was born in Michigan. We moved all over Michigan. So everyone does the funny thing where they like pull out the hand and they're like, I was born here. So I was born in Northwest Michigan, also lived in Detroit for a couple of years. My family ultimately moved all the way down to Florida and all over the Orlando area. And then I ended up in Columbus, Ohio for high school, Cleveland for college, and even in my adult life, this theme of moving around has continued. So, it's hard to choose where exactly to call home. I think I am a Midwesterner at heart, so I tend to claim Ohio. But moving around that much is just, it's a fun and interesting thing when you're a kid, because I think it sort of hardwires you to be constantly starting over, embracing newness and uncertainty, and just really getting comfortable, like reinventing yourself on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So as much as it was a little turbulent, I actually feel really grateful that we bopped around so much.
Yeah, that's really cool. I moved around as well growing up. Not as many places, but larger distances. So my parents would move us every other year. We'll move from Europe to Dominican Republic or Italy to Dominican Republic. And so every 2 years we'll be in one or the other country. in different grades and different schools. And so that was super interesting as well.
Wow. Those are way bigger moves than mine. Mine were
There
small in comparison.
there were only two though. There were only two moves, two countries versus like
Yeah.
3 states, right? Or more than 3 states, like 5 or 6, 7 states for you. What did you learn about? You said it already. You said like you learned how to reinvent yourself. What else did you learn about moving? Because for me, honestly, it kind of sucked growing up and moving all the
Yeah.
time. How was that? But also it made me like a really good person. I can make friends really quickly. That's one of
Yeah.
the skills that I got. Well, what is that for you? Like, what is like the plus and the minus of having moved a lot?
I think my experience is similar. So the huge plus is I think it made me really resilient, right? Like I have a thick skin to the unknown and starting over and things like that. But I would say the negative side of things was it's hard to really feel like you belong when you're always new.
Mhm.
And so, especially, school age years where it's that classic new kid in school phenomenon, I feel like that was always me. So, even when we weren't switching cities, we were switching school districts almost every single year. And so, I felt like, from basically call it like second grade through high school, it was just like new kid Cheryl. And so, I think there's some psychology behind that in terms of like a sense of belonging, having that security of like I have long-term friendships who I grew up with. For me, it was often a lot of like my best friend is somebody I met a year ago. So it makes you like a little bit independent, a little bit introspective in terms of like how am I going to entertain myself and be creative independently instead of relying on like big social groups. But similar to you, I think it makes you good at making friends, but constantly having to do it over can still leave like a little void in your
Yeah,
heart in a
yeah,
way.
yeah, totally. I definitely find that I don't know. You tell me which way did you go? So like by moving a lot, now I've been in Chicago for 10 years. I freak out almost every other year and I'm like, I need to move. I need to move somewhere. And then I fight the urge to move. And instead of moving, I change jobs.
That's so fun. I 100% relate. I think, especially, I've settled down a little bit more now that I'm old and in my 30s, but I think, especially in my 20s, like, I was just the yes woman. Like, it was like anytime an opportunity presented itself for something new and different, I always said yes. And so a lot of my moves were effectively almost random. Like, I moved from Cleveland, where I went to school to Baltimore. And that was just something that my employer, sort of had like a soft preference that I do because it would have slightly lowered travel costs. And it wasn't like a hard requirement that I move there, but I had that spirit of like, oh, somewhere new, great, let's go. Right. And so Baltimore was sort of random. Chicago actually was a little bit random for me when it all started. But I worked for a really cool startup in the food delivery space called OrderUp. We actually got acquired by Groupon. So Groupon is what brought me to Chicago. And very similarly, when that question went out within the OrderUp team in Baltimore of, hey, who might be interested in relocating and launching food delivery in Chicago, my hand was the first one to go up.
Yeah, that's so cool. And at the same time, I can see how it's gotten you here, right?
Oh
Um,
yeah, absolutely. I think the embracing newness has actually gotten me here, as in the seat of a founder CEO.
yeah,
I think I'm just sort of like predisposed to accepting risk and doing crazy things, and this was definitely that.
that's perfect. Your entrepreneurial spirit comes from other places as well. You mentioned this before to me. When did it all start? Kind of like the itch of working hard and figuring out solutions to problems.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was born with the entrepreneurial DNA, and I think it actually had a tendency of getting me into trouble at a young age. So there's this really funny story from when I was in, I don't know, call it something like second, third grade, maybe that my parents love to tell and use to make fun of me. But basically, I went to school one day.
Wait,
We had
that's the story, right? You're telling me.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay, tell me the story.
So I went to school one day and it was one of those classic like, hey kids, stay in school, don't do drugs, where they have those guest speakers come in and just give like a life talk to young,
Yeah.
fragile minds. So we had a player from the Orlando Magic. This is when I was living in Florida. We had a player come in and do one of those talks for us. And at the end of all of it, we all got this like 8x10 photo of him and he signed it. And so I'm young. I don't know anything about sports. I'm thinking like, I have a signed photograph. Like I have sports memorabilia. This is worth something. So I took it home. My dad manages apartment communities. And so basically where we lived and where he worked was one and the same. And so I had really easy access to like walk into his office, get on a computer, get on a copy machine. So what I did is I photocopied this thing, made dozens of copies of this thing. And I'm thinking like, I can sell this, right? So I started going door to door in the apartment community that we lived in, asking people if they wanted to like buy one of these photos. I didn't have a great hit rate initially. And so then I decided like, this has to be for charity. This is so bad. I was like a corrupt second grader. And so then I kept going door to door, basically telling people like, hi, I'm raising money for something. Do you want to buy a signed sports photo? And I actually like made some money, but the negative ending to the story is again, like my dad managed the apartment community that we lived in. So word got back to him of, oh, your cute little daughter was, you know, going door to door, being a little philanthropist. And he was like, I'm not sure what you're talking about. The end result is I got in a lot of trouble, but I think that was sort of my mindset at a young age is like, you know, what can I build? What can I do? What is the hustle that I can take on?
Where did you learn that? Like, I don't think in second grade or third grade, I even had an idea of like you raise money for charity.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's like there's the classic like lemonade stand. Can't say I ever did that, but I had a few creative schemes that I concocted.
Nice. And then throughout high school and college, you were mentioning you also started working really, really early, right?
Yeah, you know, I think I just always had that curiosity and desire to get in the workforce and just like see what I could accomplish. I think I've always been very achievement focused, right? Like it feels good to me to feel like I'm hitting new milestones and moving up in the world. So the way that started for me was in the restaurant industry. So I actually got into restaurants at age 16. I was super young, started in the, you know, least glamorous, like wiping tables, you know, typing things into a point of sale, taking orders type roles. And so, you know, got my start at a young age, but it stuck. And so I found myself getting the opportunity with that restaurant chain that I was a part of to open a new location and then become a manager and then become an assistant store manager and then become a general manager. And one thing led to another. By the time I was a full-time college student, I was actually managing a restaurant in Cleveland full-time. Wow. So it made for a really interesting college experience because I felt that in terms of my personal prioritization, running the restaurant almost came first, college came second. So yeah. I think I'm just somebody who like, I love to work, I love to build and create things. Sitting in a classroom in like an educational setting was always hard for me. Like I'm the doer, school of life type person.
I totally understand. I was also similar in a way where I have to learn and work at the same time. I cannot just like learn by itself because the learning, what I learned doesn't stick if I don't practice it. And especially for college, I had to do the thing that I was learning how to do. And one of the things that I am that is like interesting, that is different, that I found coming to the US that is different is like in the Dominican Republic, college, after first year, you go to college between 6 p.m. and 12 a.m., like midnight.
Wow.
Because everybody has a full-time job. So most people work from 8 to 4, 8 to 5, and then you go to college after hours.
Interesting. That sounds a little bit like my experience, but that certainly is not normal here. That's really interesting to learn.
So how did you manage your schedule with like work and college?
Oh my gosh, not well. So what was funny was through this entire ramp up to graduation, I always had this idea in my mind of at some point, I probably can't do both of these. Like I got lucky in the earlier years in school where the classes that I was taking were pretty much readily available. I could book them at many different times during the day. But of course, as you get to those final classes that are sort of like capstone case study type classes, they're often only offered at like one time. So I always had this thought of, probably by the time that I get to the end of senior year, I might just have to fully focus on school for a little while. So what I did is I took all of my difficult or time consuming classes and I pushed them off because I thought like, okay, I'll do a semester fully focused on this. The end result is that I did not step away from the restaurant, but I totally dug myself in a hole because my final semester of college, I had like 6 classes and they were the 6 hardest classes that I would ever take to complete my degree. So that was, I think, the pinnacle of just, I had 2 modes and it was like work and learn. And that was it. There wasn't a social life. It was pretty much like get in and start taking classes at 8 in the morning, leave school at 5 or 6 p.m., go close the restaurant, and then work like open to closes on Saturday and Sunday. Ooh. So often what Saturday and Sunday looked for me was basically like 24 hours of consecutive work. But again, like I loved it. I think if you're finding joy in that process, you can do things that might seem to other people like, oh my gosh, how did you not burn out? But I was actually having a lot of fun.
What is it about you that made you stick to something like that even? Because, many, like you said, you could have quit at any time.
Yeah, I don't know where it comes from. I think it's a variety of things. I think like there's an intrinsic motivation and just love for work and building a career and learning and moving forward. And that certainly hasn't gone away. Now that I've started a company, I'm like, what is my next goal, right? Like after IndiFit exits, like what else can I do to make an impact on the world? So it's something I've always felt, but I think it's also, it's a desire to defy the odds, I think. So, I had sort of humble beginnings. Like definitely a lot of things were not handed to me. I was very independent and sort of self-made. So part of the reason I was working in a restaurant full-time during college is because I paid my way through college. Yeah. And so I think there was also this desire to just sort of like, it wasn't about like, I'll show them, but it was just about like, I'm going to rise above my situation. Like I'm going to make something from nothing, and feeling like I was doing that was always super rewarding.
Absolutely. I also paid my way through college, and I remember like working was kind of like also a necessity, right? Like not having family or parents able to give you like support, or minorities in finding like, especially like, I don't know if like you have the same experience, but definitely like minorities of race in founding mode, they don't have like a family and friends round. That does not exist. We don't have like the ability to like be like, hey uncle, can I borrow a few $1,000,000? Can I borrow a few $1,000? Can I borrow even a few $100 to start this company? Like it doesn't, like I've never experienced that. Like most of my minority friends never experienced that, and so like we have to do it on our own kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're bringing this up because this is one of my super pet peeves that I've acquired since building IndiFit is that specific term needs to go away. Because I actually think that what you and I are saying, that's actually most founders. Like I think in most cases, friends and family is not a check from the rich uncle. It is like the hardest capital that you'll go and raise because you're convincing somebody to write your first check. So we did our friends and family round last fall in like September-ish, we closed it. And I even catch myself getting in the habit of saying, oh, our friends and family, but there were no friends and no family in it, like literally none. And so I do hate the term.
What is it? What is it called then? Like, is it first round? Is it like, what do you want to name it? Let's coin it right now.
I know. I mean, I think like you can't quite call it a pre-seed because I feel like that already means something different. I feel like it's the first round is good. I feel like it's the like fire starter. I don't know, something about something that actually indicates like this is the momentum starter, right? Because it generally leads to something else. But I'm with you. That term needs to get canceled.
It comes from such privilege too. It's like I don't have friends and family that can give me this any money. Honestly.
Yeah, I have lots of friends. I have lots of family. They're just not high net worth, right?
Totally. All right, so give us like a little bit of a rundown of how it went for you entering, graduating college, entering the professional experience, and then what we're gonna do, we're gonna lead into like what made you stop and start IndiFit.
Yeah, I'm excited to get to that part because that's probably the juiciest part of the story. In terms of everything that happened in between, graduating from college was a little funny because, as I mentioned, I had become a salaried full time general manager of a restaurant. So I was actually making money my senior year of college that was like pretty on par with what most people hope to make out of college, right? But I did have this idea of, what, I've been working so hard in restaurants for years. I'm really excited to get a quote marketing job. Like I wanted a desk job. I wanted to like get out of the restaurant industry. And so I started applying to a lot of ad agencies. That's what I thought I wanted to do at the time, was go into, like an agency environment, work on lots of different projects. And I started getting offers, but the problem is I was getting offers that all paid me less than I already made managing restaurants.
Yeah.
So I was like, this is tricky, right? So what I ultimately realized was, my resume that I had been building at that point for like 6 years in restaurants meant something. And so I ended up actually going into restaurant marketing. So I became a regional marketing manager at Noodles and Company, which was really a cool marriage of, my focus on marketing in school, but my practical restaurant operations experience. So I stayed there for several years. It was fun. It was definitely like a road warrior job. So I was traveling about 70% of the time, which was a really interesting lifestyle. And then from there, I actually went into food delivery, which was a super cool extension of, I'm still in this restaurant centric industry. However, it was my first experience in a hyper growth tech company. And obviously that stuck. That's where I've been ever since.
How does exercise come into play for you throughout this time? Whether, I don't know, probably started earlier, right? But I know you've told me before that it was embedded within you while you were being a warrior, road warrior.
Yeah, I think it's funny because Noodles and Company is probably an important character in the story because basically I'm, working for a chain that mostly serves pasta. I'm eating pasta all day, every day. I'm traveling and not taking very good care of myself, right? And so when I made that switch from working in the restaurant industry to working in food tech and working a more typical 9 to 5, at this point, I'm probably, I don't know, 23 or so. Like, I really felt like it was the right time to start taking care of myself and like taking fitness seriously. And something just happened in the years that followed where fitness sort of became my religion. Like it became this huge part of my life. And as much as I continued to build, this food tech career for so many years, the place that I turned to for community, belonging, the, release at the end of the day when things were hard or stressful was the group fitness community. And I think when I moved to Chicago about 5 years ago, that sort of went on steroids because I think there's something really special specifically about this local group fitness community. And so I just constantly found myself, being the person who was bopping around boutique studios 5+ days a week. I started making so many friends who are either taking class with me or the people, teaching class. And ultimately, why fitness, why IndieFit? It was those friendships and that loyalty and love for my favorite group fitness instructors who played such a role in my adult life. That is the reason that building IndieFit has been so rewarding.
Absolutely. I think that's extremely powerful. And I love that how it's definitely true. Like Chicago is a polyglot of exercise and fitness, like everything from like just putting your shoes on and start running to grabbing a boat and start sailing. Like it's all in between. Give us some tips about what have you found in Chicago that you really love. I know, don't tell favorites because I know you're probably not supposed to, right? But if you had to give us like something about your favorite classes or your favorite instructors, whatever it comes to mind.
Yeah, if you had asked me this question over a year ago, I probably would have rattled off like my 5 favorite studios.
Yeah.
And for the record, what some of those were is absolutely Studio 3. They're incredible. That place is just a paradise. Crosstown Fitness, Sweat, which is actually since closed, the location that I went to. But it was a lot of your typical like boutique studio fitness. But the way that I answer the question today is I think that so much has happened in fitness over the last year and a half that has actually made these group fitness experiences like so much more magical and intimate. And so I think we've seen, a lot of instructors just seizing the day and starting to like teach outdoor boot camps in the park to small groups. We've seen restaurants get really creative about how they can collaborate with the fitness community. So one of my absolute favorite things to do is that classic like brunch and boot camp type partnership that we're seeing happen a lot. So like Bar Sienna in West Loop, for example, is running an all summer long series where an instructor pops up and teaches a class before they open every weekend. I'm there, right? Like give me brunch and burpees. Like those are two of my favorite things. And then the other way that my fitness routine has really changed is I'm doing a lot virtually now. And I think that, I speak for a lot of fitness consumers when I say that. I never expected to be spending my Sunday mornings, doing squats in my living room, but generally that is what most weekends look like now.
Nice. That's awesome. Tell us about, like you mentioned like this, like the fitness industry changed in the last year and I think that lines up very well with how you started also like IndiFit. So let's get into that story.
Yeah. So I somewhat crash landed into entrepreneurship. So what happened is I actually was working at a company called Ritual most recently, not the vitamin company, love their vitamins, but not the Ritual that I worked for. So Ritual was a digital ordering platform for restaurants that was really focused on the way that people order food in an office setting. So you can probably read between the lines, right? Like COVID happens and suddenly everybody is working from home. The daytime office population has completely disintegrated. So Ritual had to, adapt, of course. And what that led to was laying off about half the team. And so I was among those cuts. And so I found myself last April very unexpectedly laid off due to COVID. And from a psychological standpoint, like that's a really interesting experience to go through. I mean, even when you know that you have marketable skills and you can absolutely go out and find something else and maybe it'll be fantastic, it's still a really vulnerable thing to go through. And so I feel like I was doing a lot of soul searching. It became this really interesting reset button in my own life where I started asking, like, I've been in food tech for almost 10 years. Do I love this, right? Like, does my work have impact on the world in the way that I want it to? Is this fulfilling me and filling my cup? And I think when I started to be really honest with myself, the answer to some of those questions was no. And so I feel like what resulted was just a period of taking a strategic pause, reflecting a lot. And as mentioned, something that I am always filling my time with is fitness. And so I found myself in a position in May where I have all day, every day to do whatever I want. And so I was working out like crazy, like almost every day. But what that looked like was very different. All my favorite studios had closed. And so I was following my favorite instructors, mostly on Instagram, and watching as they got really scrappy. And so I'm watching instructors saying like, hey, here's my new Zoom schedule, right? Like send me a Venmo and come to class. And so I started doing a lot of that. And what I realized was happening in the fitness community, which was actually so magical, is there was a surge of entrepreneurship happening. And what was surprising is fitness instructors were actually in many cases making more money going out on their own and being scrappy and independent over Zoom or in a local park, collaborating with restaurants, whatever that looked like. But what I started observing is that so many of them were being constrained by technology. And so they didn't have a great place to run their business. They didn't have good booking tools. In many cases, this looked like fill out a Google form, send me a Venmo, or like just come. So ultimately the idea for IndieFit was born. And, because we had such tailwinds because of COVID and there was a real shift happening in the market, I felt really inspired to just try to move quickly. So from the time that, I started thinking about IndieFit, it was sort of a lightning fast transition from there on to just make it a reality as soon as possible.
I love that. I really like that. I wanted to sympathize with you, being a badass woman like you are and being laid off. I've experienced that before, and I can tell you can be like a demoralizing. But I am so happy that you took that and turned it over, because like most, like sometimes we feel like it speaks about our worth, but it does not. And it's just like what happens in order to make you even greater. And I'm so glad that you're just stepping into that. It's so
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think so many amazing women had to go through this last year, right? And there's been this unfortunate ripple effect in terms of, workforce participation in
yeah.
women right now, which is super unfortunate. But I also feel inspired by how many women are sitting where I am, right? Where it's like those setbacks became something that actually propelled significant progress. And I often use the analogy of like a bow and arrow, right? So you can't shoot an arrow forward unless you pull it back. Like
Yeah.
it's that tension and
Oh,
pressure
love it.
that actually creates, the ability to shoot forward. And I feel like that was the perfect analogy for what I went through. I mean, so I basically went from some of the hardest weeks of my adult life to absolutely the most rewarding year of my life back to back. And I think that's sometimes how it goes. It's not just the status quo, it's those big disruptions that actually
Oh,
lead to the magic.
I love that. That's really cool. So you saw the opportunity, right? Super rare. You see the opportunity, you seize it. What is the first thing you do?
Oh my goodness. So, I mean, I was lucky, right? Because
Yeah.
I think some people have business ideas that require a lot more setup than mine. And
Mhm.
so, if your mission in life is to go, create a CBD water, right? Like that's regulated, you have to produce a physical product, you have to think about distribution. For me in IndieFit, like we had the luxury, I guess, of being able to be really scrappy and go really fast, because my thought process on this was we just need to be better than Venmo. Like there's so many instructors
And
who
Zoom.
are, yeah, exactly. Like there's so many instructors who are running their business with a total absence of tools. So even if we build something that is, lovingly put together with scotch tape and paper clips, it's still going to be better than the incumbent. So what that looked like for us was actually building with no code tools. And that is not a world that I knew anything about. And fortunately, in my super early days, to your point of like, what did you do first? The first thing I did first was network. Like I just talked to everyone. I talked to fitness instructors. I talked to other founders who had built companies, and I was just a sponge for advice. And luckily, in that networking binge, I came across a few people who ended up being early members of the IndiFit team. And one of them specifically had experience building with no code tools and basically standing up really quick and simple online marketplaces and platforms using a lot of like plugins and integrations instead of building things from the ground up.
What is
And so
the
that,
what is the no code tool that you would recommend if you had one?
yeah, so the very first platform that we built on is called ShareTribe. And I do think that if you're building a two-sided marketplace, that's a great platform. What was a little bit unique for IndiFit is we're actually more of a software platform. And so it was challenging for us to take a platform intended for two-sided marketplaces and make software out of it. So our version one was ShareTribe. We also heavily shopped Bubble, which I'm hearing a ton about. I think they've become super popular. But ultimately, our second destination after ShareTribe was actually another startup, and they did Techstars Chicago. And so we got connected through the local startup community here, and they're called Perry. It's spelled Pairi. So they were at a very early point in their own life cycle. And so it was a bit of an opportunistic partnership, because what I saw was other founders doing exactly what I was doing. There was a lot of like camaraderie and wanting to support one another. And they needed their first customers, right? Like they needed that first proof of concept to basically build their product with them. And so we saw the opportunity to be that, but to get a huge level of attention and support, given that we were going to be a strategic partner, not just like another user on a giant
Yeah.
platform. So working with Perry ultimately was great. We stayed with them about, let's see, 8 months. And we've now since migrated on to our own homegrown technology. But
Right.
I'm a huge proponent for no code. Like nothing
Love it.
will allow you to get started faster and with less
Yeah.
money than
Yeah.
spinning up a no code MVP.
Yeah. Speaking of money, what generally, I'm not necessarily specifically, but generally, like if you had to build a very simple application with no code tools, if somebody's listening and they're trying to figure out like how much would I spend doing that versus like building my own platform, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, it could be hundreds, not thousands. Like that's how affordable
With
some of
it.
this is. And so a lot of these platforms just charge a fixed monthly price, and it's usually in the neighborhood of like 199 a month.
Gotcha.
So you can be really, really scrappy. Where things can get a little more expensive is if you don't have the skill set to actually build out, with no code yourself. Maybe you need to bring in, a contractor, consultant who can help you with that. That's going to put your cost in the low thousands. But I think that it's just really, this is something that I kind of preach about, to be honest with you, because in my experience, what I learned is that IndieFit changed so much from my initial hypothesis to what it is today. And so I feel really, really glad that we didn't go spend, 50K, 100K building my initial hypothesis, because it would have been wrong. Like that would have been money that got flushed and we would have had to rebuild. And so, I get excited about no code for two reasons. First, I think it lowers the barriers to entrepreneurship, which excites me, right? Like I want to see more people doing this and having this wonderful adventure that I'm on. But it also preserves cash. Like I think it's just a really capital efficient way to grow your business, and everybody wins when that's the case.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. Um, a few things I want to touch on next, and you tell me whether this would be cool with you, but I really want to talk about being a female founder.
Yeah.
And understanding like I know this may I wanna make it like, so I don't want to discourage women from being founders, but I also want to prepare the audience and women and men to understand the realities of being a minority founder, a female founder, and a person that, like we said, doesn't have the luxury of having friends and family around, right?
Yeah.
Where do you want to start?
Oh gosh. I mean, I think there's a lot to unpack there, and I'm excited to unpack it. And I think to your point too, the really important disclaimer to put on this entire segment of our discussion is it is worth it.
Yeah.
Because I also don't want to discourage female founders. I do think it's in everybody's best interest to speak openly and candidly about how hard it is. It is very hard, but it is also very worth it. So that's my disclaimer to get out of the way in this leg of the conversation. I think I've experienced some headwinds in a variety of ways, but the very first and I think most important area where I've experienced it is in fundraising. And that's critical, right? Like if women are having trouble accessing capital, there's selection bias in future leadership in all companies, because women aren't able to hit that milestone where a company is, hiring at scale, creating a corporate culture that is women led. So the bias in fundraising has been a real pain point, I think, more than anything else.
So what are some of the situations you have faced? How have you tried, or what have you tried to overcome it?
Yeah, I think a lot of the bias exists really like where the rubber meets the road. Like I don't think that it's necessarily harder to get a meeting as a woman. I think, I feel that I have pretty open access to pitches. If you put in that legwork, right? It takes a lot of legwork to get that meeting, and it's almost like marketing. But I think what I've experienced is where things start to break down for me is what happens in the meeting. And there's a really interesting study that HBS did that sort of like validates what I think I have anecdotally experienced. And basically what they found is in a pitch setting, they found that investors are more likely to ask a male founder what's called promotional questions. And so they're questions that basically set the male founder up to promote their business. So a question like that might be, how big can this get? Right. And so that sets the stage for them to be like, I'm building a $1 billion business, and here's why. And unfortunately, what women are more likely to get are questions that put us on the defense.
Like,
And
why questions? Why do you think this is a good idea? Or
oh
what?
yeah, like, I'm not sure this market is big enough. How are you going to defend against your competitors? How are you going to build a moat? How are you going to make IndiFit defensible? And those are just fundamentally different questions. And so one of the things that I've worked on personally in my fundraising journey, and I tend to advise other female founders on, is, focus on what you can control. Like, I can't control the type of questions I'm going to be asked, but I can control how I answer them. And so what I'm really focused on is actually like having that little voice in the back of my head that's constantly going during a meeting that's like, is this a promotional question or is this putting me on the defense? And if I'm getting asked those questions that are typically answered more defensively, I give a quick little soundbite to answer the question, but then I flip it. Right. And so if you're being asked, how are you going to defend against your competitors? Give a 1-sentence answer, but then say, you know what, this space is so big that I don't think it's a zero-sum game. There's room for lots of winners in this space. And now I've got them focused on the giant market size instead of like going head to head with my competitors. It's sort of the redirect tactic.
I love it. It almost feels like what they advise to politicians, in which,
yes.
Well, I don't even know what it is, but that's what it feels. It feels like a way to get out of it and then pitch your thing the way you want to, which is, by the way, I totally appreciate this tactic. Like, I found myself doing this in interviews, right? When even when I'm interviewed for a job, the type of questions that they ask me that would be completely different the type of question that I ask a male counterpart. And so like it's like kind of like pitch and pivot, or like bat and
yes.
pitch and hit kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly right.
Have you been successful at fundraising? Have you got a funding? Like, what is IndiFit doing? What are you doing? Like, tell me about like your success.
Yeah, there's definitely success to celebrate, but I do feel like in some ways my journey has been representative of the journey of a female founder in the Midwest, and there are some downsides. So, to speak to our success, we have raised about $500,000 in funding life to date. So we've got a nice amount of runway. It's allowed us to scale our team to 4, which is so exciting. It's a real paradigm shift as a founder to sort of comprehend, like, this is not just me doing it all. This is a well-oiled machine that is cruising even without me, which is super exciting. So we've been able to raise that funding. However, the source of that funding is what is a little bit concerning to me. So that $500K came entirely from accelerators and angel investors. And so what that looked like was me pitching like crazy. I've pitched almost 150 times throughout the last year and a half. And by the way, that's very normal. So that's what's wild. That sounds like a high number. Very normal. Like, that's probably the average. For like to close a round, like to close a pre-seed round. Oh, okay. 150 pitches is like a very normal number.
For any founder, not only female founders.
Yeah, I think in reality for any founder. Okay. But what I experienced is, most of our funding, like I said, has been small checks. It's come from angels. And so the amount of work that I had to do to raise $500K, I do think was larger than potentially a male counterpart. Because I think that VCs, specifically like true institutional capital, rather than capital that's coming out of a high net worth individual's pocket, I do think that VC has a bit more of that bias. And it's tough, as a solo female founder, right? Like, to be taken seriously at this stage by an institutional investor is an uphill battle. And because I wasn't finding traction with that, I pivoted. I was like, you know what? We're killing it with angels, because angels are investing in people and we have a great team and I'm very passionate about what we're doing and people love that, right? And so we raised what we needed, but my fear is that I think it took us longer and I think it took more of my time away from running the business than if I were a man. And that's a bummer, right? But like, I think that's what makes female founders like scrappy and gritty and like a very strategic opportunity to invest in, is because when we find ourselves in that position, we do what we have to do. And so I think that was my journey, but certainly I do look back and wish that it had been more efficient or less time consuming.
Oh my God, Cheryl, I appreciate your hard work, and I cannot tell you how much I feel you, because it sucks, but I'm glad that you're building the company of your dreams, and you're doing it successfully. And you like, you sound like a badass. You seem like a like, I have no doubt this one and the next one companies are going to be great.
Oh my gosh, the next one. I can't even think about that yet. But thank you for the kind words. I appreciate it.
Multi-founder, I see it already. Multi-founder, unicorn. You got it.
Gosh, you know what the end game has actually become is I'm loving building IndiFit. I mean, this is so rewarding, and every chapter is new, right? And so I'm like, okay, I've experienced the getting started chapter. I've experienced the making my first hires, raising my first capital. The next chapters are exciting in a different way, right? Like, it's much more focused on traction and growth and scale and raising institutional capital. So I'm loving the journey, but something that I have really felt through this journey is part of what I love about it is the ability to share my learnings with others, and take what I'm learning and my successes and victories and using them to help somebody else. And so I think that I've realized that, like, my end game, I think, is like becoming a career angel investor. Like, that's something that I would love to do. So, if IndiFit has an exciting exit, like, yeah, there probably is another company at some point in the future after it. But I think that the more immediate goal is, how do I take that capital and how do I reinvest it in women and actually be a real, source of advice and coaching for them. So, that's a little ways in the future, but I'm excited about that chapter of my career, and I believe that it's coming.
Yeah, I am looking forward to something similar. I have recently started class for venture capital, or fellowship in venture capital. And I am also looking to get into angel investing. I think there's so much support that we can give to our community, our women in the founders, that I think it's going to be super cool. So let me know. And
awesome. No, I'm excited to have a follow-up conversation about this.
We can have our little fun together.
Exactly. When I hear that sentence, I want to get into angel investing. It's like a Pavlovian response for me. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, let me help, right? Like, let's talk about this. Yeah. I've met so many amazing angels, right? And I think that's another way that I really like to help and give back, is like when I can create that connectivity, not just between investors and other founders, but when I can take somebody who's new to the angel investing game and introduce them to somebody who's been at it for years and help to share knowledge. Like, these are the types of, gives that actually elevate the entire startup community in Chicago for women. So it's something I'm super passionate about.
That's perfect. And I think this is a perfect time to tell you that we're almost at time here. Believe it or not, it's been almost
oh my goodness.
an hour.
It flew.
I know, that's how it goes usually. I want the audience to know where they can find you. What is IndiFit about? What have you been up to? Do you have any events coming up? What's going on?
Yeah, so I guess I'll hit off my personal stuff first. Yeah. So as I just mentioned, having so much fun in this journey, but love sharing it. Like, I think that all learnings are meant to be shared. So something that I have started doing is actually blogging about my founder journey. It's really hard to find the time, let me tell you. So my articles are sometimes not super consistent. But my personal website is cheryl-kemp.com. So definitely check that out. And there's obviously all of my other social handles stem from there. And then on the IndiFit front, we're in growth mode right now. And so, as mentioned, we've grown the team. We have, an amazing product and market that we're super proud of. And so we're really focused on scaling this to as many fitness instructors as possible. So if anybody listening is a fitness instructor or knows somebody who could benefit from a business management platform, would love to chat. And if you want to read more about us, our URL is indifit.co. No M on the end.
Gotcha. And accelerator, right? Are you part of any accelerator right now?
Yeah, we're squeezing in our big news. So we got some really exciting news just a week ago that we've been accepted into the Lake Nona Accelerator with Lead Sports. So I'm going to be upgrading to SPF 100 for a little while and temporarily relocating to Orlando. But what's really exciting about the program is it's a joint venture between Tavistock, who's a big leader in the real estate space, and Adidas. So getting that network specifically in sports tech and fitness, aligning ourselves with a global activewear brand is a super exciting opportunity. So this is hot off the press, and we've actually just been doing orientation and getting started this week. So more to come on the exciting outcomes of that.
Congratulations for your success and this amazing business. I wish you and this business the best. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the news soon and releasing this episode for sure.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me again.
Thank you so much.
Woo! There you have it. I hope you liked this episode, and please don't forget to share, like, comment on the podcast link. Tell all your networks and friends and family about it. Submit a recommendation for guests at www.unbossed.io. Subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Donate by clicking on the anchor link and help me continue to make great episodes. You can find all this information on www.unbossed.io. See you next time.
Oh, that was good.